Record.
All right,
Are we on?
we're back. We're going to delve
Okay.
into relevant and popular dieting. We're going to begin with I
Ketogenic
suppose,
diet.
yeah, the diet. So the keto diet come to popularity. There are some obvious reasons that since we've begun to realize the devastating effects of a high sugar diet, we've begun to look at how to flip that around. Additionally, a lot of people have had a great deal of success, primarily with fat loss and weight loss from the ketogenic diet. So we'll expand on the keto diet a little bit. We'll touch on trends because humans just repeat trends. It's what we do. And we'll touch on maybe just some of the possible negative consequences, possible risks, and some of the nuance associated with the diet as to why it might be or not necessarily working. Cool. What do you reckon, Jay?
Sounds good to me.
Good start. And if we have time, we'll go on a few tangents and try to add some additional insights. So we'll start with what defines a keto diet, Jay? Is it primarily
It seems it seems to be quite a loose and fast definition, to be honest. It's
yep,
essentially don't eat carbs, have
yep,
lots of fat and
yep,
protein, but
yep.
they're not too much protein. It's
It,
heavily focused on the
yeah,
fat, really.
like the stuff I've covered is definitely like 80-20, 75-25 split, being basically 80 fat protein, so 80% fat, 20% protein. It's the stuff I've come across slashes or usually been touted. So yeah, this incredibly high fat diet. Now let's
Um,
expand a bit on that.
yeah, so I guess we'll start on like why it was actually used in the first place. Before all of this, it was typically used to help with people who were having epilepsy or seizures.
Interesting.
It was quite effective for helping to prevent those seizures, which
Yep.
is it's been a while since I looked into it now, but I would say it's like it was more towards the glucotoxicity, like having too much glucose floating around the brain is probably leading to well, like the damaged areas of the brain being or having too much excitement or excitotoxicity.
It sounds like the glucose mechanism because fasting is also a very effective way to deal with epilepsy.
Mm,
So
yeah.
and it's also the oldest method. Like there's literature from the Greek times citing darkness and fasting as a cure for fits. So
Mm.
it's a very very old method, and which is interesting. So obviously keto diet might be a more sustainable method because we can't fast forever. So, well, in saying that, fasting with a regular practice of addressing general issues in the diet may drive someone towards a corrective path as well. In other words, they're improving the general health and function and their body's response to glucose and may cause positive benefit over time. But that I'm guessing and just drawing a bit of logic together on that a bit. But anyway,
Yeah, so that was the original use for it. But like most diets that appeared, it was mostly popularized because of the weight loss effect. We have
certainly was.
a
Humans are
fascination with the weight
completely
loss.
look. You could tell someone that the keto diet is going to make you smarter and happier, and it's going to raise your IQ, and people will care less about that than losing weight. So it's the weight loss effect that has really popularized it, which is also understandable. We have obesity. We have obesity issues here in New Zealand and globally. So anything that positively affects that is not a terrible thing.
Yeah, it's definitely good on the whole for the individual. However, like our motivation for a sex driven, really.
If I'm
Yeah,
skinny, I'm more attractive and healthy. Yeah,
yeah, we
really
want
simple.
to create
Of
more
course it is.
offsprings.
We're all full of shit when we say otherwise. I love it. It's just, let's
Yeah,
put
yeah,
it back to the reality of it. It's like the guys who come in the gym. It's like, oh, I just want to lean up, get, I want to get healthy. It's for my mental health. It's like, just fuck up, bro. You want to put on muscles. You want to look more masculine and sexually appealing. That's the truth. So you can call it whatever you like. That's actually what you're trying to do. Just cut the bullshit, please.
yeah. It's okay. It's okay. You don't
It's
have to
okay,
lie.
bro. Just be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, we all get it.
Yeah.
We all want to be jacked. Want to get
Correct.
big. Want to get
That's right.
strong.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah,
Interesting.
that is the next reason why people started using it, and then it started becoming. It generated almost a cult-like following.
Yes. Ideological, dogmatic following. Totally. Um. Yeah. Let's. So obviously we've got a lot of interest in it. For the most part, I do think the keto diet is at least pushing people in a better direction than where they may be. It's just like when CrossFit popularized paleo, right? Which just means human. So it's like, okay, why use you're turning normal eating into like this word, which is a buzzword, which then allows us to become tribal and ideological and dogmatic about a behavior when it just means human, or like Paleolithic, which is just essentially this period of time of what kind of human we are, essentially. Anything after Homo erectus.
It's funny though, because we always find a way around it. Like the vegan diets, the keto, the paleo. Someone's going to make money off this. We always go out of our way to find products that we can create. So we'll have like the keto cereal, paleo cereal, or like baking. I still want to eat my baking. I want to eat my baked goods, but how am I going to do that? I'll find a way. Use a variation.
Correct. So veganism ultimately appealed to the emotionally sensitive people who had trouble dealing with death. So that's really where that fits in, which is obviously a large sector of society. It's ideological, and it's very irrational in the sense that it fails to understand the effect of the mass production of plants and what that can do on environments and how that can wreak havoc on the average person's body. And then totally here we are. The keto diet is still very popular. The major things I find where people are slipping up on is the sustainability of it. So obviously people are losing a lot of weight, and then they tend to revert back to habits, which are to revert back to introducing some of the foods that maybe they like, or the fact that it's actually quite hard to adhere to the strict rules of the keto diet. If you are an individual who is overweight and you lose weight, you are still at far higher risk of regaining that weight than an individual who has sustained a healthy weight for a long period of time, because we've got far more complex mechanisms to deal with. We've got learned habits, we've got programmed environmental habits which are just deeply drilled into you, and we've got poor control mechanisms over the things that got you there in the first place.
Probably dial back into the fundamentals of weight loss as well, because then that is another misunderstood thing about a keto diet is when you start, because insulin holds on to a considerable amount of water, so you'll have that water drop first. So that's going to be your first miraculous weight loss moment, which gets people excited because they dictate their health, or they dictate their fat loss by the scales. And so to start with, it's a lie, really. You get excited, it's cool. It might start the journey, which that's probably the positive thing that can come from it, but it's not being on the keto diet that is inherently helping you lose weight. What actually helps people lose weight is going to be that ability to reduce the total caloric intake, meaning they're going to eat less in the long run. Not all the time, but typically when you have more fat in your diet and more protein, you're going to be more satiated than if you're fiend up on high fructose corn syrup all day long, which will end up creating a positive feedback loop and making you eat even more.
We're also eliminating an entire macronutrient. When you've got more variability in eating, you can eat more. It's a real simple way to put it. If you have more access to flavor variation and macronutrient variation, the body's capable of consuming a larger amount of calories. It's easier. Take, for example, if I was to boil potatoes and all you were allowed to eat for the whole day is unseasoned boiled potatoes, it's very, very hard to actually overeat on boiled potatoes, but it's just a starch, it's just a carb, right? But you will actually, I'll put you on the boiled potatoes diet, and 90% of overweight people are going to lose a great amount of weight on the unseasoned boiled potatoes diet. So so I mean, that's another interesting part of diet is when we restrict the access to foods. Great, that's an effect. But let's also just highlight that the sugars that we're consuming in New Zealand are wreaking havoc on people's weight and well-being. It tends to be in the forms of things like breads, very low quality flours, pastas, battered foods. We actually deep fry and batter a lot of shit in this country. I've kind of come to realize. For example, Great Wall, the takeaways right next door to the gym, which I eat at all the time and I love it. You should see the amount of people that roll through there and smash at lunch a lunchbox, which is tasty as hell, but it's just a lot of battered stuff, man. A lot of battered stuff.
Yeah. If you can't manage your diet, if your major intake of food is going to be battered fried food, that's when the real issues are going to come about. Versus someone who's having it every now and then, almost there's like an adverse supplement to a typically normal or healthy diet.
Yep. What kind of individuals do you think might take to a ketogenic diet more naturally? And when I say what type of individual, I'm talking about male, female, I'm talking about race, genetic origin, age.
If we're going to talk about a type of people that would usually be more attracted to it, from what I've seen, typically it's people who have yo-yo dieted in the past and they've really struggled to find the solution. People who have a poor relationship with their weight, or a bad relationship with their weight, because once they try this, it takes away a lot of the self-control. As long as they've got everyone on board around them, or that they exclude themselves from those who are going to be eating carbohydrates. If they can do it, if they can eat the fat, it tends to make a big difference. You can't half-ass a keto diet. You're not going to say, I'm only going to have 100 calories of carbs today. Like you've got to be as restrictive as possible. So yeah, I had a lot of people who would come into my supplement stores who were who professed to saying that keto diet was magical for them, and they would tell everyone that would listen to do the keto diet because of the positive results they got.
Now, these positive results, again, are they in response to weight loss, and are they in response to health, as in like improvement of their dropping of fat or weight and increasing in the feelings of health? Would that be what they were citing?
Very rarely did they talk about their feelings of health. It was usually weight loss related, because they would always start with, I dropped so and so many kgs within so and so many months, and usually it's a ridiculously unsustainable amount of weight that they've lost. And that's probably something that we should also address, is that sustainability and the gradual weight loss is important. You don't want to lose a lot of weight really quickly, because your body is adjusting to the total amount of calories that it needs to, or that it requires in a day. So if you see the biggest losers, the show The Biggest Loser, the people that lost, they raced to lose as much weight as possible. They tended to gain it back plus some after the show was finished, because they've gone and reduced their total caloric intake, or by a drastic amount.
And
If your body only needs 800 calories before storing fat afterwards, like it's going to get massive.
they also increase their metabolic demands massively,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's a very rare case. If you drop your calorie intake massively and you get like, if you add a lot of muscle and fitness, your energistic and metabolic demands, you actually could be in quite a nasty situation where your body is just going to it's going to have a ravenous response to food and recomposition when it finally does start to get it. And you can get into, this is a very rare occasion, I should say, as well. Like, again, The Biggest Loser is not a great representation because they were in a managed environment.
Extreme.
Yeah, it's the extreme. Yeah, so these people basically kind of, they started gaining weight again, but they were still kind of physically fitter and more capable, but they struggle to keep the weight off because of this new kind of metabolic dysfunction, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. It's a better way of putting it. That your metabolic requirements aren't going to drop drastically because it's in response to the environment that you've given it. Like where the body is incredibly adaptive. And so if you were to go through a famine, then it's going to drop its requirements to suit the lack of energy that is available out there for you to consume.
I personally think, sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say, once you actually have access to food and you start overindulging, then you're going to store a lot of fat because it doesn't want to go through a famine again. It wants to store as much fat as possible to survive the next famine.
Interesting. Would we argue that low calorie is more dangerous than fasting? I personally do think that, just of what I've covered. The only reason for that is when we go into a quality fasted state, the body stops demanding food. It starts burning a bit of fat. And there's various opinions on this, but I think that fasting done correctly can be a great kind of appetite reset mechanism. So a lot of the people who are overeating, obviously we're dealing with sugar addiction, environmental habits, unconscious habits. We're dealing with food addiction, and we're dealing with overactive appetites. And again, we won't get into the fasting conversation, but it obviously, that can be a kind of a pretty smart thing to consider versus going super low calorie. I think super low calorie, which is almost like under subsistence, can not only just undernourish, but also make you feel really, really shit. Just tired.
Yeah, it's a horrible feeling to be on a low calorie diet versus just straight up fasting. And I think it's probably tied into the idea of metabolic flexibility. So I know it's hard to drum up a theory on this because we're trying to imagine what it is of the way that we lived beforehand. So, but what I'd like to imagine is for anybody who lived through seasonal changes, or say our ancestors that lived through seasonal changes, they typically would have had animals available or mammals available to hunt during the winter. Like very, very sparingly. You would have eaten meat and fat through the winter, and if you don't have meat and fat, you would be fasting and subsisting on what fat you'd stored during the summer when there was much more fruit, which would have helped to build that storage. So I'd imagine the metabolic flexibility of being able to depend on fat stores or carbohydrates is essential for our bodies to function, because we've got these systems in place for a reason. Like we're expectant of feast and famine. And we all flow within the seasons, but now that we've got access to carbohydrates all the way throughout the year, because we can take fruit from the other side of the planet, it's like we've messed with the body's ability to regulate for the seasons.
Interesting. Is there possibly a negative relationship between, say, like carbohydrates in winter as well, just due to the fact that we might have like less sunlight hours, less movement, less warmth, energy expenditure? That's an interesting one.
I haven't got any research to back it up, but I would imagine so, that there would be
pretty logical.
Yeah, if you've got the carbohydrates coming in, but then the sunlight is low, or the sun angle is low,
Mm.
and the way that you operate, yeah, you're not moving less. You want to be having a lot of movement if you're getting lots of carbohydrates, probably running around
Yeah.
doing a lot more, you might. But all of these variables combined will have like a synergistic effect.
Mm.
But it's hard to determine what those variables are doing when our lifestyles are so different from how we would have operated originally.
What are some of the possible like negative side effects of the keto, or ways that people are maybe doing it wrong? For example, vegetable fats versus animal fats. For example, what about people who may be overdoing it in terms of like calories? If we've got some ideas, we've got some notes there, Jay.
Uh, yeah. So the choice of the foods you eat is important because
Mm.
you do still want to be getting all your essential vitamins and minerals or nutrients from your food. It's more than weight loss. It is essential to ensure that health by getting good quality foods. So if you're having a heavy meat diet, um, you want to be getting that grass-fed or more wild meat if possible, which is going to change the fat ratios as well. Say even eggs, if you've got chickens who are living healthy lives and maybe they're running around out in the grass, they're eating worms and other insects, they tend to have a higher omega-3 ratio or omega-3 to 6 ratio, which is going to be better for cardiovascular and brain health.
What about for the average individual who doesn't have access to game and like farm fresh eggs, which is most people? How do
It's
we
going to
help
be a
that?
little bit more challenging. That's the
Okay.
nature of the planet at the moment and the way that we're operating. Like if we have shit quality food, we're going to feel shit no matter what diet we have.
But like again, let's try consider what we can do, right? Like, okay,
Let's try hard.
the reality is, for example, how many people hunt and actually eat hunted meat, right? In Auckland, I'm imagining it's like 2%, if that.
I'll get a couple of pigeons out on the line that I can
Yeah.
harvest for tonight.
I'm imagining the boat ramps are fucking cluttered in the weekends. Probably lining up for an hour to launch your boat to go fish against the other 10,000 fellas going for a fish. Again, how would we go by approaching that? Like, for example, at the supermarket.
Okay. Well, I'd say before the supermarket, I'd go to a market if possible. But
Yeah.
that's not available for everyone. The supermarket, if you can, go for like grass-fed meat. Chances are it's probably going to be more expensive. It's
Are we
easier
are
for
we
us.
te- are we technically rolling a keto diet if we're a protein lead diet now? Would we call that a keto diet, or would
If
we call
we're
that?
just going
Yeah.
heavily protein,
What would we call that?
I don't know. Like, it's tough because we're giving these names to these different sorts of diets, but
Correct.
the boundaries keep moving. Like some people on a keto diet would just smash bacon and olive oil all day long. It's still
Correct.
keto.
Bacon and eggs is the big one that. Another one I find funny is all the vegetables that people eat on a keto diet, and I'm just not sure how keto it is when they have carbs. So I'm like, okay, your
Yeah, well, a
vegetables
lot
full
of
of
people,
carbs,
yeah,
it's not keto anymore.
you
Keto,
can. Some
your
people
keto.
might be able to handle a little bit
Oh,
better than others, but I doubt it's.
so again, it's like I'm not doubting that at all, but it's just like you're not really adhering to it. And you're probably getting a positive benefit from it anyway, because now you're eating lots of vegetables and protein when before you were eating bread and pastas and energy drinks.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that is
so
another major effect, like the change of the things you're not putting in. Because
correct.
let's be
Yep.
honest, no one's going to be measuring their ketones here, the ketone
No,
levels or their glucose levels.
no,
We're all winging it if you're going on the
correct.
ketone diet.
Yeah, even people who calorie count, margin of error on average is about 20%. In other words, even if you think you're measuring your like, I fucking hate calorie restriction diets just because they're kind of full of shit. And like a smart person can probably get within 10 to 15%. However, the average person has got a margin of error of 20%, which is massive. You're not really affected.
Yeah.
However, it's the bare fact that you're bringing mind to it, so you're actually there's some measurability to it, right? So that's why it kind of is effective to an extent.
Mm.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, it's all about you becoming more intuitive with your own body and seeing what happens when you eat this food, what happens when you eat that food. My weight's going up. Okay, that's because I did this before. Like, you really gotta pay more attention, because people tend to gain the most weight when they're not paying attention to what they're eating. That's why one little thing that I used to give people when they wanted to get the most dramatic weight loss is I'd say, get out a notebook and I want you to write down what you've eaten for 3 days. And just remember that if you lie in the book, you're lying to yourself. What you tell me you eat doesn't mean shit. If you want me to help you with your weight loss, I want you to say exactly what you wrote, exactly what you've eaten. This would guilt trip them into eating better. So they would either lie, they would guilt trip themselves into eating better, or they would tell the truth, and then I'd get to help them later. Because the act of writing things down makes you think more about what you're eating, and then you're like, oh shit, I am eating terrible stuff all day. And that's one trick. Whereas, if they're honest about what they're doing, then it means that I can give them little tidbits later on that might help.
Again, I want to try drive home some constructive aspects for people to consider. If you're going to do keto, yeah, sure, stick to the animal driven fats. This is my opinion. You don't want to be smashing seed oils. Those are fucking terrible for you. We've proven that. You want to manage the amount of fats you're getting from nuts. You want to manage. You can't live on peanut butter. Despite what most people think, it's actually pretty toxic to a lot of people. It's not amazing. I love peanut butter. I'm not necessarily going to be an advocate for it. A lot of people are actually quite sensitive to it. Everyone's heard of the peanut allergy. It's a very real thing. So yeah, and again, as diets evolved, a keto diet is just Atkins. It's just the Atkins diet. Again, humans follow trends. In the 90s, there was a lot of controversy about the Atkins diet. The Atkins diet was just essentially a high protein, high fat, low carb diet, which is somewhat following in vein of what most people are doing with this keto thing. And yeah, if you're doing keto on a budget, at least try to circulate between your fairer cost proteins. And when I say fair cost proteins, it's ground beef, if you have to. Sweet. Eggs are pretty unaffordable. Government did a good job of that. But yeah, certainly, obviously, anything that, bang for buck fat. Bro, I've been smashing pork lately. I love pork, but the pork roasts are cheap. It's $9 a kilo. So I'll just eat the whole roast to myself. Yeah, with a giant, good old fat rind, which is basically bacon. Some things like that. For me, I'm good with dairy. I have no issues with dairy. I'm not going to claim it's perfect, but I'll smash the butter and milk as well. So for those of you who are fine with the old dairy, our dairy's not perfect here. It's kind of like what you call insipid. It's been cooked, it's dead, but it's still tasty. Yeah, but there's some constructive things. Don't be scared of it. Bit of cheese, again, if you're fine with it. I know that many people are not good with processing that. So yeah. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. Fad diets. Ultimately, what are the big mechanisms that are giving you benefit from keto? As we discussed, it's the things you're stopping, which are harmful to you. As Jay said earlier, it's possibly the initial reduction in water from cutting out the carbs. So your body's flushing water because it's not getting that sugar, which actually can hold quite a bit of fluid in the muscle. Was that correct, Jay? Would we say it's the carbohydrate held in the muscle?
It's the insulin, really. So your insulin levels are going to drop. Since you're not bringing in a whole bunch of sugar, and
and again the restriction of macronutrients, so you've got less variability. Your body gets more easily satiated. If for anyone who's if you want to do a little test, just go and see how much peanut butter you can eat in one sitting, and nothing else, and you get sacked pretty quick. You actually feel kind of gross. I find when I've never done keto, but if I have a brutally high fat meal, I actually feel quite gross afterwards. I'm imagining that's what people on keto feel like often. Just that kind of gross fat feeling from having loads and loads of fat. That sounds about right, doesn't it, Jay?
Yeah. I'd say if you want to punish yourself and feel that, go
Yep.
get a whole slab of pork belly, cook that up, and just eat that by itself.
Yep. Yep.
That
Absolutely.
hits you pretty quick. You get pretty saturated with fat.
Should we maybe touch on carnivore diet? Should we muck around on that for a minute?
Yeah, why not? It is quite close to the keto diet.
Gaining rapid popularity. I think part of the reason it gains popularity as well is the tribal aspect. Like, it's a great way to go fuck you to like veganism, and it's also a great way to go if you to the government, since there's been all this like fart tax on animals, like, so there's layered nuance behind it. It's almost like there's all this reclamation of masculinity stuff going on, so like guys feeling more manly for smashing more meat, but also there are a lot of people gaining a great deal of health benefits from it. There's a guy, Dr. Shawn Baker, I follow, who's pretty thorough on it. He's probably the most well-known carnivore, the most well-known individual communicating that I know. And then you've got guys like Jordan Peterson, who popularized it, obviously through his own personal experiences. We should pay note that he's an individual. And then his daughter seems to have had great benefit from it. So I'm imagining there's going to be what you call hyper responders and people who are like, going to, and then again, it's exactly the same as a keto. Once you remove the stresses, you're functioning a lot better. So it appears like there could be a subsect of the population who are just more sensitive to more things. That might be a reasonable way to put it. And so like a reductionist diet like carnivore, which is only animal, could be very beneficial.
I think something that tends to separate the carnivore diet from the keto diet is it is well, on top of all the socio economic issues there, is it's more honed, it's sort of sharpened. It's like what the keto diet was started out as until they started going hard on all the seed oils and all the nuts and seeds and whatnot. It's just purely meat. It's the simplest diet or isolation diet. The thing that gets me interested in this diet is the autoimmunity issues being resolved.
Totally. That's the big one for me as well, bro. It's just, I don't care what anyone's opinion on it. It appears to be having drastically positive benefits for so many people with serious autoimmune issues. And like, again, I refer to Shawn Baker. The reason I refer to Shawn Baker is because he's probably been the poster boy for carnivore, and he has had tens of thousands, now it might even possibly be in the hundreds of thousands of communications with people reporting back and citing significant improvements in health orientated metrics, not weight loss. And so when you begin to get an overwhelming amount of positive responses, then you have to pay attention to it. You can't just go, we need to protect it. Also, the commercial aspect. Look, the beef industry is small compared to the processed plant / food lobby. You're not going to get the kind of funded positive research that you're going to get for, the kind of bullshit we see out, like Fruit Loops are healthy, which is the latest thing coming out of the States, like on the food table. Like, so you're not going to see the kind of bankroll and study because Nestle doesn't have a ventured interest in the success of beef. Anyway, that's another 2 cents on that one.
Yeah. It comes down to industry again, that the way that the food is portrayed in the media, or the studies that are isolated, like all the ones that say that eating red meat is going to lead to cardiovascular issues, but then there's lots of mixed feedback there, because there seems to be those who are going and getting their blood measured, so they tend to see that the lipid profiles are being corrected, which makes no sense. Then it might possibly be the fact that they've reduced the excessive sugar or the glucose in the diet, so it's leading to less advanced glycated end products, so less inflammation in the endothelial damage because of the lack of sugar, which means that your like the blood vessels are going to be healthier. If the blood vessels are healthier, they can expand and they can deal with changes in blood pressure better, which means it doesn't matter if you've got saturated fat, because the saturated fat is going to be able to run through. There's going to be less plaques. There's going to be less response to go and send saturated fat or the cholesterol to the area to heal the damaged wall. So there's going to be reduced plaques as a byproduct. But I would imagine that is going to be less of an issue because like a lot of our research has been done on people who eat high carbohydrate diets. And so it's really hard to generalize what's going to happen to people who are only eating meat. Our research is done on people that eat everything.
Also, like I'm imagining a lot of these people who are, suffering from all these health dysfunctions and autoimmune issues. Those are becoming to be apparent that they're driven from overeating the likes of processed sugars, seed oils, and nutrient-empty foods from a young age. So they're essentially eating the opposite diet, they're eating a nutrient-empty, high-stress diet from a young age. And so when you're developing these issues, the most common one that we're aware of being diabetes, which is just absolutely rife. And then suddenly when you, like let's call it like some sort of a drastic course correct, and you prop them up on essentially the opposite diet, which is pure animal, high protein, high mineral, high nutrient, it's having some pretty positive benefits. So that's the kind of like that's the raw logic I'm looking at. I like to look at things quite logically, and also obviously support it with a bit of science. But I'm looking at it as nature and logic. That you pump someone up on food that basically has no value, that is crap, and you feed them that for a long time, and then you get them very sick, and then we course correct by putting them on the things that they essentially had giant deficits in that are quality, and it tends to have a pretty positive response. And that's me extrapolating a bit of logic.
Yeah. Well, I'm feeling like just taking big leaps of faith and to guess why it is that this is all happening, because everyone's an adult, or everyone watching is probably an adult, so they should be able to do their own research and figure this out. So this is my guess. I'm going to say that a lot of these autoimmune issues are going to be caused by the body's inability to deal with specific plant compounds. So there'll be certain seeds or types of protein that come from specific plant compounds that won't agree with the gut lining. And I think that is going to be specific to people who live in like a very northern or southern hemispheres, or people whose ancestors come from northern and southern hemispheres. Areas in particular that are much colder throughout the year. So there'd be less access to these plants or the compounds that come from these plants.
I totally agree. I think that people who come from cold places, in terms of genetic origins, probably run better on meat.
Yeah.
Because, when it's snowing, what fucking plants are you going to be eating, bro? It's just this, and, there's a reason why, I'm just going to call it Germanic origin individuals are better with like dairy and high meat diets. If we go further back than that, it's likely Scythian, and that's going very, very far back. Scythian being like essentially the progeny of the Germanics, Gauls, Celts, and so on, and then essentially the people that now occupy Northern Europe, central to Northern Europe. It's whereas obviously as we come down and we come to places that are more lush, which are like temperate climates. New Zealand's a more temperate climate, but as subtropical and temperate climates tend to have a lot more growth, so you get more heat and sun, and if you have the right balance of heat, sun, and water, things grow. And a good example of that is the fucking rainforest, isn't it, Jay? So growth, plants, I suppose. Sure, that is a bit of a leap of faith, but I don't think that's crazy.
It makes it tough now that ethnic backgrounds are so mashed up.
Yep. But in
Yeah,
a
like
way that makes us possibly more capable of, in a way, would that make us more capable of handling a greater diversity of food as well?
yeah, well, it'll be if we're going to start moving into evolution, like you're going to get genetic diversity, sort
Mm,
of throwing everyone in a blender. But that genetic diversity doesn't necessarily mean that we're all going to get stronger as a benefit. All it means
mm,
is the people who got the short straw will die off easier, and
mm,
that's what leads to the improvement or the evolution, that the survival of the
yeah,
fittest occurs. But we don't really allow that. We want everyone to live happy and healthy lives. And so if people are sick, we're going to keep them alive longer, even though they are sick, instead of the way that nature would typically cull off the weak.
what might be some negatives to carnivore, and who might maybe not operate so well on it?
I would imagine if we're going to go by my guess here, like anyone who lives more near the hemisphere whose background carried a lot of carbohydrates, so like
Mm,
the Asian countries that would have a lot of rice and
mm.
well, any countries that had lots of beans and lentils, so like
Yeah,
like
middle
more South
continent, so India,
America.
Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. The middle continent, they had, huge background of like legumes, potatoes.
Yeah. So
Um,
I wouldn't say that
yeah.
staying heavily on a heavy meat diet is going to be the way for them. It's when it comes down to it, it's probably going to be like white people. White people, if we're going to
Okay. Yeah.
generalize.
In saying that though, like for example, here in New Zealand, we're seeing a lot of Māori and PI, overrepresented in terms of like diabetes, obesity, and I'm
Mm.
completely certain it's obvious. Same mechanism: overeating crap food, overeating processed sugar, processed nutrient-empty foods, and there seems to be a great deal of like course correct and cutting those down as well. So I think a common myth in Pacific cultures is that they had a lot of carbohydrates, which I'm not so certain with. No, I would say that like Māoris always talk about kumara and stuff, but it's like, bro, actually eating a lot of seafood.
Mm.
Actually, archetypally, we're eating a lot of birds. The kumara certainly was a crop, and it was supported. You also got Māori potatoes, but there was a huge amount of shellfish, seafood, and birds that made up a significant portion of the diet. And then obviously we didn't have the issues of giant diversity of crops. So it's not like we had 12 different carbs to choose from. It was a very limited range and quite simple. So we didn't have that effect there. Same with the Pacific Islands. Obviously, taro, coconut, fish, seafood, and I'm sure there'll be some variants of fruit, atoll and island area to island, and significant crops. I would have to look into that more. But on coastal nations, it's just, it's silly to suggest you're not eating a huge amount of seafood and fish. That would make up a significant amount. And yeah, so I'm mindful of that as well, particularly for those individuals looking at the carnivore diets. You might want to tailor it more towards some considerations of for example, for fats, you can consider coconut, you can consider seafood fats or fatty seafood based things, fatty fish, so on and so forth. Not a terrible idea, but
Mm.
yeah. But
Yeah,
also,
we don't have to go to the extremes, right? We can moderate and we can just get rid of the high fructose corn syrup, like any of the fructose from the diet, and that's probably going to recreate a bunch.
yeah, yeah,
But it's cheap.
yeah,
It's really cheap to have products that have a lot of fructose in it.
yeah. Yeah. Is there any more nuance in the carnival we could extrapolate today, Jay? Is there anything we haven't touched on?
There is the common counter argument for carnivore and keto, for that matter, of
Hmm?
the potential nutrient deficiencies or say no fiber, which would everyone says you need fiber so you can have healthy bowel movements or to help the microbiome.
Hmm.
There are a lot of like fiber is like a prebiotic. It
Hmm.
allows or gives food to the microbiome to eat to lead to a greater diversity, which
Yeah.
also that microbiome is supposed to help you create specific neurotransmitters like GABA. So it's said to have a healthy microbiome is going to lead to better mental health, as well as greater ability to handle specific foods or sickness. But then I'm not sure about that, because if you're actually sticking to the carnivore diet, you're probably not going to need that diversity. You probably don't see any reason to desperately need fiber if you don't need to reduce the glycemic load of carbohydrates. Because that's
Correct.
another reason that we say to have fiber.
That's another thing I've covered, is that your requirement for that is to do with dealing with the sugar.
Yeah.
That's
And
what it
vitamin
seems to
C
be.
as well. Vitamin C is another big one that we talk about, saying, well, we need vitamin C. It's like, well, you don't need vitamin C as much if you're not eating carbohydrates, because carbohydrates or glucose competes with vitamin C for absorption. So your absolute need for vitamin C is reduced. So you should be able to get enough from the foods you eat.
It's almost like an auto-regulation mechanism, though, isn't it? If you drastically reduce the plants, then your necessities for the things that might register proportionally higher in the plants are less needed.
The vitamins and minerals that we tend to be deficient in when you eat more vegetables, you seem to be able to make it up by eating more organ meats.
Okay.
So as long as if you're going to go carnivore, this would be a big piece of advice, would be to eat more organ meats, varied organ meats. Don't eat too much of them too often. So I wouldn't have, say, like a beef liver every night of the week. I would have that maybe like once every 2 weeks, because you're going to get too much of specific vitamins and minerals because they are potent. Same with shellfish. So eat variable organ meats, eat shellfish, have soups, bone broths. Get the marrow from the bones. So just eat from nose to tail, not just the meat, because only eating meat is kind of a bit weird and wasteful.
What about this is just, this is out of my own personal interest. What about people who would have had a diet high on shellfish? For example, like if you live coastally, mussels, pippies, and even things like, are pretty abundant. So, the individuals who say are coastal and diving frequently would have had proportionally more and appear to be okay. What's our thinking there? Is that maybe for individuals who had a long diet history with that?
Yeah, well, definitely. I wouldn't cut it out. I know, like there's always the talk that people from, say, more Polynesian backgrounds should reduce their seafood because they might get gout. And I think
that's one that I've always found really weird. I'm almost thinking that the gout, what's it? Uric acid buildup, right? So the argument is that the uric acid in the seafood. The majority of the people I know who get gout, and again, this is anecdotal, they're not healthy people. So then they go and throw all that seafood at it and tends to blow up. I'm imagining that gout is likely more prevalent in an individual who's probably how would I? It's not fair to say, but if you're more overweight and you have a lower nutrient diet, lower immune system, and a high carbohydrate diet, and then you add in uric acid risky foods, I'm imagining there would probably be far higher risk.
It's poor health communication, really, to simplify what it is that we choose to eat, because it's the same thing all around when it comes to diabetes and cardiovascular disease. We say don't have salt. That's only a problem if you're already too far, like if you've already got a high risk. Like, maybe reduce your salt because your potassium balance might be out, or because you really need to manage that blood pressure. Or don't eat saturated fat. It's like saturated fat's not the problem. It's all the sugary crap that you've eaten in the first place. But maybe if you are at risk again, then you probably should avoid saturated fat. And then it comes back down to the seafood again. It's like the seafood's not the bad guy, but if you have the seafood after you've eaten a terrible diet or on top of the terrible diet, the combination is the problem.
Just as you've touched on salt there as well, the average person is quite inactive, so their salt requirements are probably going to go down. Whereas I'm dealing with a lot of people who are very active. So in the sport or athletic or training community, often we're finding ways to increase our salt intake. because of the exercise demands. So salt's going to assist in muscle communication and making your muscle work. So if you're working your muscles a lot, guess what? You need probably more salt. And it's worse to be undersalted than oversalted in that scenario.
And then the way to counter that poor feeling about salt is to just call it electrolytes.
That's right. Or develop a positive association with salt.
Yeah. As long as we're eating a healthy diet, we should have a good balance of all the different electrolytes anyway, like the magnesium, the potassium, the sodium. They should all come from a good diet. But if not, if we are way more physically active, then maybe we should look further for our electrolytes.
For me, I like the old humble spud. People don't know that it's one of the most potassium-rich foods. So there you go. Full of potassium. Bananas. And that's right, not just bananas. You can smash spuds. And then, I just use salt. I just use a fuckload of salt on my food. That's me personally. Obviously, you use it to match your needs. Yeah, I'm not... Magnesium, that's a more nuanced one. I'm not really familiar with the foods I eat that actually have a terrible amount of it. It's kind of hard to identify things that have a lot of that. What are some normally accessible, readily available magnesium foods? Everyone seems, a lot of the sports and health community are pretty obsessed with magnesium. Everyone thinks that if they have magnesium cap, they're going to have a magically better sleep. I can tell you right now, after taking magnesium subs, that didn't do shit to my sleep, but that's cool. But what are some commonly available high magnesium foods?
From what I can see here, it's pretty much you're going to run counter to your carnivore. There's the leafy greens, legumes, nuts and seeds, whole grains. So you can actually get magnesium from the organ meats as well. If you don't want to eat organ meats, you might be shit out of luck.
Yeah, again, I would say that 1% of the population eats organ meats, if I'm being honest.
One's pretty high.
I think one's pretty high, Jay, but genuinely. People aren't lining up to get the livers and the kidneys and the heart, Yeah. Bit of pate, bro. Bit of chicken liver pate. There you go. Get into it. Yeah, delicious. Yeah. Cool. But that'll do, bro. Well, I think that's a reason. It's a general expanse entry into keto. Maybe a few more angles for people to consider about it. Consider your genetic components. Environmental factors, like how were you raised? What kind of foods were you raised on? Your body would have adapted for a really long time to the things it was frequently exposed to. Really simple. So, when I was growing up, we ate a lot of fish. We ate a lot of fatty food, and we ate a lot of just basic garden food, bro. Bro, for example, just, your broccoli and your spuds. It was pretty simple eating. We ate a lot of, probably more fish than most, and we get a fair bit of seafood. Where I'm from, a lot of puppies, and then again, a whole lot of things like just humble, basic veggies, your carrots, your spuds, and your broccolis. Now, there'll be some value in going more consistently with how you were brought up, and
because I'm sure your immune system, your microbiome, and the enzymes that you're producing as well and the minerals that you're going to store in your bones for times when you need those minerals. They'll all adapt depending on what you've eaten. And I'm sure you can change a lot of it, but it's reasonably difficult.
There are a couple of habits that have stuck with me, which I'm stoked and happy have stuck with me, and that's that I just have a habit and tend towards pretty simple whole food. It's just how I am, which is great. So, my mum did a great job on that front, just keeping what we ate very simple and very basic. And I just fall back on, the same. I would imagine if I looked at the average ingredients I eat over a week, it's pretty basic, bro. It's like fish, steak, spuds, a couple of veggies, and milk. I love my milk and eggs. And I eat a lot of that stuff, so I'd say, a huge amount of what I eat is really, really heavily focused on all that stuff, So
I think I might have gone backwards there because I had I had no desire for tasty food or anything like that. So I ate very simple. So it was just all really basic food. No
Mm,
sauces, no salts, no nothing, no spices. And I
mm,
was fine with it. And then yeah, my partner, or Helen, she loves food. It is the most important thing to her. Coming
mm,
from, yeah, she's got a Chinese background, so
mm,
she loves salt. She loves the umami flavor. She loves chili. She really loves chili. Like spicy food.
mm,
When we
mm.
first started eating it, I lost my hunger. You want an appetite suppressant? If you're not
Yeah,
used to eating spicy foods,
yeah,
that took my hunger away immediately as
yeah,
soon as I ate until I was in pain. So I just stopped eating and I
yeah.
start losing weight that way.
I love food too. Like no doubt about it. Absolutely love food. So yeah, I don't operate to any sort of dietary restrictions. It's just 80-20. What's the average meal I eat look like? And it's pretty good. That's the most important thing. Is what is my general state and habit. You know, absolutely. I'm a lover of food. If I wasn't, you know, um, I'd be a much skinnier person. But that's not going to happen. So yeah, but yeah, cool. I think that's a great little touch base on that. We'll wrap that up there. There's just nuance to the keto diet. People have to remember that diets are just essentially rehashings or variations of things that are done before. The majority of diets are done or propagated and popularized due to weight loss. They always are. Humans will prioritize aesthetic over health. That's why they love the keto, because I'm skinny and I feel more sexy. It could wreak havoc on your health. And a good example of that is Ozempic, Jay. We will touch on that another time. Another good example of that, Fano, is anyone can remember the lemon detox, which was absolute bullshit. You were starving yourself and having a fucking lemsip. Straight up, that's what you were doing for days and going, wow, I lost. It's like, yeah, you starved yourself for fucking 3 days. Well done. And then what happened when you ate food? What happened? You fucking came back. But that's humanity. We prioritize short-term effects. We prioritize effects that are just in line with our deep wants, which are to be skinnier and look sexier, or whatever the hell it might be, right? But yeah, also we can also understand people's desperation in response to obesity and serious challenges around control over food addiction and dysregulation as a result of being badly nourished for a really long time. But yeah,
Yeah.
we'll go over some of the craziness of like some of those yeah. I mean, Ozempic is an interesting one. I actually think that's going to be a serious issue. I think it already is personally, bro. I know people use it. There's a particular syndrome within Ozempic, which is starting to arise where it's messing up people's stomach to the point where it's like for those that don't know, Ozempic is like a popular peptide which has started being used for people to lose weight. It essentially literally turns off your hunger signal. You lose your hunger. The only problem with that is when people are introducing food, there are cases where their gut is quite literally rejecting food, and there are quite scary cases where people, and this is happening quite commonly actually, where they're starting to reject food to the point where they're vomiting without control quite nastily, and it's shutting down their guts. So all in the name of getting skinny, Jay.
It'll be quite the one to address in the next next
Yeah,
pod. And I would say just like coffee, there's way too much positive press on it, and that makes me nervous.
yeah, it's fucking dangerous. Real simple. Anything that turns off your ability to eat, we should be quite robust in our consideration of it. That's quite a serious mechanism to just boom turn off. It's like, yeah, it's basically the trend of weight loss. That's a better way to look at it, with more horrific side effects. We'll call it there though. We'll waffle. Chur, bro.